Well, all right. So I tried to make sure my days off were separated. So I have to make sure I get in a walk. Wow. I don't know if somebody is definitely manicuring this area. Like this is incredible. And it's been and so I've been watching this because when this is one of these areas of specialization where I look and I'm like, okay, this looks like shit. But then I'm like, no, 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 no. People who work in this field for this area really know their stuff, like really do. Like to the point where you kind of wish they were the people who did really run environmental things. Because what they'll do is they'll manicure it in a way that they'll let it get to an overgrowth point that once they manicure it, it has this perfect defense around the groups of trees of taller grown sort of base plants that will help anchor them, help soak up water, loosen the soil. It took me a while to find information on this. It was somebody was talking. It was how to make a forest or something like that. But I didn't realize the various canopies, quote unquote, that you're trying to go for. There's even a term for it. But it's like the height at which there's a canopy, and so there's stuff that lives there, and so different canopies will have entirely different environs, like how much light gets through, how much moisture there is based on the ground, or is it that it's a canopy that dries that tries to dry the air, that it's made up of something that's really trying to dry out the air, because it's because of something else that will feed off of the moisture on its surface, and so it was really cool. It was, yeah. So I just wanted to show you guys that because it's interesting to see over about a year's time, or over a season or two, how they've been doing this. Yeah, only about a season or two, actually. I guess I was watching it because I've seen over the years various stages of this. I'm like, what is the deal here? But then by a certain time of year, it is perfectly all cut back, and with enough plant growth that it would reinforce it against flooding, because this is running along kind of a creek. So something that I was thinking about is the idea of, and the liberals will beg for order, but I've been trying to figure out really in a way how. Like, and so then I saw the kids, and the kids are all making sure to wear their masks. And these are teenagers. So this is the idea of like, when you're rebellious, or when you're going to be rebellious, are you rebellious? And so it was something that I started to think of, okay, and so in blue enclaves, their kids think they're smarter than they are, and their actual educational institutions aren't up to snuff compared to about the other 2/3 of the country. But yet there's this attitude within this little blue enclave, like, oh yeah, no, we know things. We have sort of this magic knowledge about stuff, and other places that are really like where people do rocket science. There are rocket science institutions. There's this one dude who does a traveling, but that kind of list thing. I think John something, and he does these lists of the places, especially like the highest crime places in America, the places to go in Ohio, the places to avoid and things like that. He actually got into sort of the 10 worst places to live in Oregon, and I was watching it. I didn't even realize some of the places, the level that things were at, the total collapse of the economy itself over generations. And so one of the things I was thinking about is, because of sort of this lack of reality around economics itself, when it comes to, well, if this is such a great place, why aren't you doing what it takes to ensure people can like survive here? And so suddenly I started thinking of the Mother Gaia kind of thing, that this very, was it pernicious? Is that a persnickety kind of goddess, the mother goddess of the earth, and she'll strike back at us. And so then it really hit me that that's really one of the key places to look for all this shit, is that mentality, that you really have a God in Christian religion that for people in the blue enclaves is very unsatisfactory, because he has all these things that he kind of will let you do in a way, but he doesn't want you to do, that you want to do. And so it's not about I need to improve myself through actually having means of doing so. It becomes I need eventually to do things that would apply to a savage and ritual magic society. Blood rights of children, that the Mother Gaia needs to be assuaged by the abortions. This makes perfect sense. Ever since I was reading that thing from Robert Briffault about how, no, humans have always like sold fundamentally their daughters and wives through sort of an exchange of beads or a public rite of some sort, because that's really how women kind of are wired. Men are usually wired to be kind of mostly obedient to society, as long as they could go along with the hunts or go along with the, they go along to get along, because we were mostly confined to populations that, and areas of population that were no greater than about 200 people. Hence the thing that we could only remember about 100 to 200 names, and faces. So, because up until about the early 1900s, people were still confined to places where the idea that you might have to get hitched to a second or third cousin simply wasn't weird. And yeah, so humanity has not delivered itself from that level. And so the Rona really has given us this way of looking that we now can clearly see the very pagan, very ritual magic, voodoo mentality, because Christianity requires at some point you can make a rational argument. That's the most important thing about it. Your argument shouldn't just be quoting scripture. You'll be looked at really askance. It should be also fundamentally good on its face. That what you're trying to do is to make people, is to please as many people as possible so that they can live their life and life at its fullest. You're trying to do what only God could do, which would be benevolence because judgment is for God. And that's also then why law has to work. That's then something else I was thinking about. Law has to work for the right Christians, patriots and stuff, or else there's no institutional structure such as the country, the culture, the people to actually invest belief into. You just no longer, it's just who your clan or your band of people, and you and your people will survive. You and your kith and kin will survive. That's why I keep saying to everybody, God bless your kith and kin, or good to you and your kith and kin, because that's what it's becoming. It's becoming that kind of country again, where we're moving from something that actually could have been the height of the modern, but we're moving backwards into something that's almost at the level of the tyrannical and tribal of the third point of the political triangle, the authoritarian, totalitarian end of the triangle. And that's, the individualist end of the triangle it was too difficult. That's when now it started to hit me, was that quality of this. That if people, when we think about us Randian types, people who are into F.A. Hayek and things like that, and when we think it through, that's actually something that, you realize how much it took at a certain point to alter the way that you saw the world, that you're like, that's a great observation. I never put it in those terms. Hey, little doggy in a sweater. Look at that. I love dog sweaters. I don't care what any of y'all say either. I love dog sweaters. That it took so much work to read the books, to listen to lectures that expanded on some of these ideas, that you're like, oh, human value and work is a fundamental of human experience. And so because it's fundamentally a part of human experience, it becomes a fundamental part of human value, that's really the reality of it. And other ideologies, mostly from the Marxist school, are trying to divorce those two. But they're also not really coming up with a way that can work. So there's then these attempts to sort of fill in the holes with more and more, especially like kind of a warped version of rights that we now are really seeing. It's like, no, that you're talking about a privilege, not a right. And a person's like, no, but you see, it is a right, blah, 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 blah. And, and that they do end up confusing these terms, and I think really quite purposefully. I think it's actually on purpose now, and it's someone going out of their way to confuse terminology to argue these ideas. So it's because the Marxist school is still, it's working against all of human experience. That was something I hadn't thought I had said on my channel ever, was that it was that the Marxist school is always working against all human experience. So it's desperately trying to come up with new versions of its own ideologies and theories to, hey, puppers, oh, an industrial sweater, look at that, camping sweater. And hats are too much. Hats look like they're uncomfortable and weird, for the dog to deal with, but a sweater, that makes perfect sense. So the Marxists are always dealing with, like, what do we do to fill in this issue of, well, humans really behave that way, and how we no matter how they want to explain having to like get things makes humans then behave a way that and it's because it's so it is fundamentally bourgeois people like Hassan Piker and Vaush who do this, that they have no way of really describing a lot of this stuff or dealing with it philosophically, because they've never really been like on the streets and broke and poor, and then basically were able to come back as an intellectual and argue for their intellectual ideas. That's the road to Randianism and libertarianism, typically, not towards socialism. Socialism is the person brought back by some kind of charitable group or something, or everything they did was based around a learning institution that had a program for people who had lost it all and were homeless. I think I've actually run into stories like that here in the States, that now and then. You get this a lot from the illegal immigrant community, and that some charitable thing set up by the Democrats, creates a Marxist, which now we're just at that fundamental stage that the Marxists want to really undo everything that works well in society, which in some way, shape, or form is normal, quasi-traditional. And so the next stage is now coming after the tax base of the solidly middle class. And it's just to punish everybody. And the whole idea is that for the average peasant, Democrat-thinking, leftist, liberal-thinking person, this is the vengeance of Gaia. Marx is a prophet who saw this all coming, or there'll be some other author or, some person who hates society that they'll cite, and they'll be like, oh, they saw this coming, blah, 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 not really dealing with the fact that it's like, well, no, I mean, like, your party set it up like this. Like, we wouldn't even have Social Security around if it wasn't for you Democrats. You wouldn't have to worry about it collapsing inevitably. Like, what do you not get? Why have none of you looked up the term Ponzi scheme? And that's the whole thing, is this idea of, we've all looked that term up because we had to know what we were arguing. If Ponzi keeps coming up in a conversation, you have to look up Ponzi. And I've realized there's a whole portion of society that doesn't give a rat's ass about that. They're not going to even engage in the argument once they hear Ponzi scheme, because why should they know things? They know that Mother Gaia and the power of the government, if the people aren't helping the government make the changes that Mother Gaia loves, and that it's really that end of savage religious fervor. And since seeing Colin Woodward's book on American nations and getting this idea of, okay, there were the people who were pursuing fortune for a number of generations, then you would have people who were the absolute settlers, who were the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who established most of the learning institutions. People like my grandmother. Turns out her family was out here establishing some of the infrastructure in the among the parks department or something like that, like national parks. So like living in a national park and doing different things. So those kind of solid white Americans were brought out here with all their Protestant religious fervor, to the point that, California was a red state into my lifetime, into the 90s. It was a state that you really might not get the Democrat, that there were Republicans still that were governor in when I was young, repeatedly. And so a lot of the collapse of that part of society slowly becoming more and more like, well, maybe we shouldn't be so square. And then the good times came. So it became this very peasant-minded thinking of, well, you see, everybody's relaxing now and times are different. And me and Bob, we got a separation. We need to separate. I need to feel new feelings and the happiness and the joy. I was reading that book about happiness, joy, and my feelings by some woman with a flowery name. And so it's the new religion has taken over. And it's very much based out of the organizations that, that no matter what kind of spiritual, mystical system they were selling you, based on tarot cards or based supposedly on the Fama Fraternitatis, that they were always basically arguing at some point for a type of computational sort of quasi-Marxist, like AIs will run the Marxist future. Because the computers can use science. It's a computer. It is science. It's an adding machine. Science. It's been too long. I had to get one of these long ones in. Oh, it's only 19 minutes too. Yeah, I'm at full speed on this walkway. So now everyone's starting to see also the what are the Gen Xers and millennials. And really, obviously, a big part of this is millennials. Big part of it. Because too many Gen Xers, it probably applies to us, but I think there's too many of them that they need. So they slogged it back to work. They got their shot. They went back to work. Or they're trying to, do it, online. I think a lot of companies now, that they're on the way that they're doing online work. I think a big part of the Democrats wanting to know what everybody does with all their money, have the banks report every transaction at request. I think a lot of that has to do with trying to get ahead of a type of future where you have people do work for you and you just pay them some set fee. They just say, I'll do this for you, and they just charge you a fee, and that you exchange money, and that the government, that's too difficult right now to tax. The cyberpunk future is actually too difficult to tax. You would have to do it pretty much through the exchange, through whatever service does the exchange, and that's its own mess. Then you're taxing every PayPal thing, and it's like, why? Why are you doing that? That's the whole point of PayPal, is that it's its own exchange. We're paying the fees that are required already. What I'm looking at is the labor involvement of millennials. That I think COVID crushed a lot of these young people psychologically, quite permanently. I see a lot of people that, when I think of what their street age looks like when I see them, I'm like, this guy is definitely, he's not my age. He's a millennial. He's about 30 something. He's in his, he's about 30 something, just about 40 or so. And there's a whole lot of people now. They are gouged out on the fucking skag all the time, wandering around where I work, not doing anything menacing, it's, they're getting stuff, they're getting things, but it's because you see it in the hands, of course. When you addict, it shows in the hands in a lot of cases. And there was some things I never understood why I noticed that about certain women's hands when I was younger. And somebody explained to me, she's on probably a drug for the brain. She's probably on brain pills. And that's, and you're seeing it in her hands. That's what it does. I was like, that's fucked up. So there's a lot of people now that I see around that they're just gouged out on the skag all the time. They're just living like bandits. Living like human raccoons. Now there's a new shouting nut job in the neighborhood. This guy, now it's interesting, with the black dude, he's more of the screeching madman. This is the one who really is just straight up the, no doubt about it, on the cursing. And he's yelling at his invisible enemy or whatever. And, nobody does anything. Nobody wants to be involved. Nobody wants to get involved with any of that business. They know better. They know better than to get involved in that business. So, wow. These are these two. Oh no, okay. There was these two characters I saw walking there. I'm like, those look like famous athletes. Holy, what is it about their gait that makes them look like famous champions? I see you walk with honor, sir. So I started to also think about so what really, how bad does it look like things are getting also? Which is pretty bad. The Evergrande stuff and everything, that's getting pretty bad. every day new stuff about the contagion and who, and all that. That's extending. But it's also that how there needs to, okay, so extending taxation on the most productive class, so that, which is not a large number of people. This is only about 20% of taxpayers are the really, really productive class that taxes would have to go up on. At this stage, one of the things that I'm starting to think of is, like, this is the thing that crushes the Democrats. Historically, this is literally what crushes the Democrats. They can't, they every time they do this, they lose. They lose for a long time. Because no matter how cool some now 300K a year household kind of person wants to be, they do understand there is definitely a difference between people who they're getting the 6-figure K a year income household. They're staying married. They have multiple kids. That actually, to keep a household rich takes a lot of work. It's easy to simply have to be alone with a bastard. It's easy to be a bachelor walking with coffee. This is easy. It comes for free. It's very hard to keep a household like how somebody like Johnny Bravo, Jay Bravo channel, how that guy exists, I don't know. Like, he is on some super powerful vibes all the time. Like the most powerful go get 'em champ vibes. Like, everybody, more and more young men, whoever his students were, they should understand that they met a fucking phenomena, because most of us do not have the level of energy that somebody like Jay Bravo does to just keep on going, and take the risk, do it, and then, he's a surfer, fucking Marine, like, and it's one of those things, like, do you understand he's a Marine? Do you understand, young person, what a Marine has to do to become a Marine? Like, and there's a term, once you're a Marine, you're always a Marine, and I was just like, no, people don't, there is, in the new order, there's no respect for stuff like that. Now, the next thing that really hit me too is, and I'll wind up with this, was the disclosure that the FBI has no investigation going of Antifa. They have no interest in it. They look at it as an ideology, not a group in any way, shape, or form. So now we basically have it. The federal government supports Antifa. That all this stuff happening in Portland, even though there's an FBI hub there, they're going out of their way to ignore it, which means that really, because of the way that we understand that, how it has to work, that they're monitoring it. They're monitoring it, and they're actually being a part of it in some way, shape, or form. And they've admitted it now. I mean, it's one of those between the lines, like, you have to understand how power works kind of admissions. No, we're of course not investigating these people, because if we were to investigate them, it would fuck up what we're doing for the Democratic Party. And now we're being really told in easy terms, because of the right questions, that, okay, no, the Democrats have come to their full form. They've really shown themselves to be, they're nothing but duplicitous liars that are always making things up and causing the social problems. They're pretty much the people who cause the social problems, and then extend it for generations on from there. And now, one of the last things I was thinking about too is how, in many ways, say the black female electorate that always goes along with all this, that now you see clearly, when you're dying, when your children are dying, when they admit they were harvesting your aborted fetuses, now you see you hate your men, but these white chicks who you really envy and want outcomes like, that you thought if you emulated them that you would get a certain kind of outcome in life, and now a generation of you are having to, begawk and cluck over the things Kevin Samuels is making clear, like, well, that's the way it is now, isn't it? You're alone, get a dog. Like, that's it. You took too long. And that reality is reality and stays way too real on the Riziel, and fuck your physials. That's the beauty of this, is, you're finding out reality is a gangster, and reality will steal your fucking time. And so, just straight up. And so now you realize also that politics and long-term multi-generational political movements can lead to the decimation of your people. And that's what you're seeing now. You're seeing the decimation of your people, and that they're openly bringing in people who will outvote you. And what they were going to do through trying to fuck with the way that voting works on the Democratic part was to let it be so chaotic all the time that you eventually would find that your vote had been stolen. That your black vote had been stolen in your black neighborhood because of the new people who are moving in, that there's special privileges for, because these people, they need all this help because of the oppression they were under. And your oppression story will go down the fucking toilet, and their oppression story will become the oppression story everyone has to listen to, and it won't matter because there won't be that many black people. There's not that many now. It's not that many now. And so now we're seeing it. Now it's plain and simple. It's beautifully plain and simple. And how dark this is going to get, how ugly this is going to be. It's already ugly, but it's like there's no way around how ugly it can be. The potential, the amazing potential of super ugly tardedness that our culture is coming to. Super ugly tarded. All right. There's probably some way of putting that all together. All right. Anyway, talk to you soon.